What is good, everybody? There we go. We got some light on the subject. Hello. Look at this fun sweater. It has like a neck. I don't know. It dropped maybe a few degrees here today, and it was funny. Like immediately, whoop, the sweatshirt is out. So it was a day where I was doing errands and all the things, and this was a necessity. It even has zip pockets. I don't know. We're a fan. I guess you probably put your phone in there and run. I don't know. And pockets down here too. Right? It's the little things, y'all. Today, though, just like I'm recalibrating, that's hilarious. I'm going to talk about that. I want to talk about divine dates to recalibrate and that you can really have those all the time. So what really struck this for me was I was talking to actually a few different folks this week. So I had a couple of clients that brought this topic up. And then I also had a team call just last night where we sort of followed the whole gamut because it's a once a month call and we get to check in with everybody and see where they're at and how we can brainstorm and power through some blocks that they might have or give them fresh strategies and inspiration to really go at it again with a new perspective and a new sense of gas in their tank, right? So it was neat that this keeps coming up because that's letting me know that it's definitely relevant and timely. But this idea of recalibrated, y'all know that I am a word nerd. So you get the sense of like things have gotten out of place. You need to get them back into order. That's what I would just say off the cuff. But I think sometimes it helps hearing what the actual definition is. So here we go. This is coming from Webster. Systems gradually drift off course so that the navigator periodically needs a fresh point of reference to recalibrate the navigation system. So that's an example of how it's used, right? The problem is that eating more doesn't sate us. We merely recalibrate how much we think we need. So these are examples in a sentence of what that means. Trying to think of some synonyms. That's also a fun way to do this. Bum, bum, ba. Diversify, renovate, change, reconstruct, amend, adapt, modify, revamp, like completely revamp, develop, reform, turn, convert, vary, mutate, transform, transmute, remodel, adjust, rehash, check, alter, remedy, set right, fiddle with. And then what does it mean? To determine, check, or rectify the graduation of something, any instrument. To divide or mark with gradations or different degrees and quantities. Another word for it, to fine tune or to gauge. So that gives you a lot to work with when you think about recalibrating. And I am definitely somebody who is a breaker, meaning thought leadership, for example, is an example of like a breaker anointing where you don't do things the conventional way. You come at it with an entirely unconventional or different approach and you get really different outcomes. I believe leading, where are my words? I believe that leading a spirit-led life is very unconventional. Not a lot of people do it. Not a lot of people model it. So, and that's not something that you can predict. You have sense of character, of heart position, all that kind of stuff, but you really don't know how that person is necessarily going to, what their next move is going to be. Okay. So I definitely believe that I operate with that. I also am a big reformer. I have come from a lot of dysfunctional or deformed patterns, right? And just things that were not healthy. So I have constantly looked for ways to reform and to bring solutions where their need is most, whether that's in the realm of recovery, whether that's in the realm of, social justice, whether that's in the realm of just self-mastery and your own self, whether that's in the realm of business, whatever it happens to be, that's something that's really, really important. So I really love this word recalibrate because I don't think that it is something that you just do right before New Year's or that you do around your birthday when you want to reset or recalibrate your life. That honestly is something that we need to be doing a lot. And I'm going to talk about that because there are so many different things that can kind of pull us or shift us off course without us recognizing it. And there was an example that I heard. I don't know when this was, but the folks, the drivers, the navigators of huge ships, right? Like picture like a cruise ship or something bigger than that. They set their navigation system on a set point. And if they don't check in and recalibrate, some of the way that they're moving about can take them off slightly and put them in an entirely different route if they're not constantly checking that and checking back in with their reference point. So if a huge ship can get off track, right, and lose track of its master point or its navigator, how often can we get out of alignment with God? It's not that God shifted. It's not that the set point shifted. It was our path to it that shifted. So hopefully that gives you a visual or that makes more sense. But so many times we're going through life and we're disconnected from God because we start operating in our own understanding, right? Or we get really caught up in our emotions, or our heart has something going on that we can't connect with God. And when we're not connected to God, we can't hear God and can't be guided by God in the same capacity, right? God has his ways of getting through to us no matter what, but it's not the same, right? So we need these daily check-ins. I believe that that's why there's daily bread, right? Like we go to it daily to really have self-reflection, healthy self-reflection as a practice so that we can see what we're carrying every day and where we can adjust and refine and realign if we need to. So I brought out a fun tool. It's like show and tell, if you remember that. But this is a pyramid, and I'm going to walk you through. Dun, dun. It's a pyramid of self-mastery, and I'm going to show you a wheel too. But the base, from the base up, there's actually 7 things. So the base is your physical body, just to give you a sense of like what needs recalibrating, these things. Your physical body, your emotions, and how we assign meaning to things. Because when we assign meaning to something, we put energy in motion, okay? So emotion is literally energy in motion. So when we assign meaning to a thing, we give it energy, right? That could be good or bad. You've seen that happen. Relationships is number 3. 4 is time. 5 is our work, our career, our mission. Those often get clumped into the same category. 6 is finances. And then 7 is our sense of contribution or our spiritual sense. So it is so interesting to me that that's kind of what you get up to. But I honestly feel that spiritual is first. That's just me. But an extraordinary life comes from focusing on constant improvement in all of these areas. And that does require self-assessment, self-awareness, self-reflection, so that you can get to these points of self-mastery where you're literally taking control of your will so that it can partner and agree with your spirit to get you to this future vision that you see, or the desires of your heart that God's put inside of you. This other one is a wheel of life, if you can see it. And I'll kind of walk you through. This is something that I teach in coaching, actually, but I've done it quite differently because typically we are at the center of this wheel, and that's a fundamentally flawed principle. But when you look at this wheel, all of those areas that I mentioned, all 7 of those are on here. And what you can do is you can rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 to see where you've moved off the target. Gradually, probably to the point where it's unnoticeable, or it could be noticeable, but you've gradually moved off point. So rating it a 10 is like you're very happy, fulfilled in this area of your life. Rating it a 1 or a 0 is you're clearly not giving it any attention. You don't even know where to start. You just don't even want to think about it, right? So as you rate these different areas of spiritual sense, physical body, emotions, relationships, time, work, career, mission, finances, you can see as you rate them all what is low and what is high, and you can see exactly what areas that you're out of balance. And the premise with this is as you shift one area, and even if you're moving it 2 gradients back towards balance, all of the other areas shift. So a really good example is if you go from being financially fearful and in an anxious place to stability, that shifts all these other areas, right? There's less stress on your body. Your emotions are probably more stable and calm. Your relationships may be healthier. Maybe you might be devoting more time to them. You might manage your time a little bit different versus like all focus on career or whatever your income generating activities are. So everything will shift. And you'll probably live from a greater place of abundance and gratitude as well when that area is healthy, just as an example. So when you shift one, you can shift all of them. So that's something that's really important to do. If you don't do it every day, I recommend weekly and for sure monthly. Some people do it quarterly. It just really depends on, I think the difference is, are you high performing? Are you very passionate about the impact that you have on other people and that you really want to steward that well? Are you very intentional about how you show up in the world with managing your time, your energy, your resources, all of that? Doing it more is essential, because the more you have on your plate, the more you need to recalibrate. Straight up. Okay. So let's talk about this for a second. Divine dates to recalibrate. So one of the folks I was talking to, this happened to be a woman, so much on her plate, right? Had just started a new business. There was a bunch of family things going on. There were, what else was happening? Different transitions happening at the same time to folks in their life. And she was kind of caught up in the middle and taking it all on. So because that was all going on, she felt the need to take time off, to like get everybody out, to send people away, just to give her a week to recalibrate. I had another woman actually that I was talking to that is feeling like she needs to transition out of a certain place of work, but she kept taking on more work. It was very counterintuitive. And she really wanted to be there because the boss was going through a health crisis. And so she was taking full responsibility, not only for the work, but for that as well. And that was getting her way, way, way out of balance, let alone someone in her family was ill, and then somebody else had passed away. So she's dealing with all of these things and doesn't know where she's at in the midst of all of this, and really can't show up and be who she is desiring to be. Or another gentleman that I just talked to recently, he wanted to publish a book, but then as we started talking, he started talking about his nonprofit. And then we eventually got to a place where he really wanted to develop curriculum for young men and help them be better providers to their families. And so it was interesting. I could see how maybe he's piecing these all together, but what was revealed was that he needed to recalibrate, because his original intention for launching his nonprofit is not in agreement with how he's grown today and with what he's led to do today. And then he had this nonprofit idea because he didn't believe in his own worth to create something for profit. So there's work there to recalibrate so he can fully step into what he's legitimately called to do, so that he doesn't play small with what he's been given, so that he can really steward that well and with integrity too. So those are just some examples just that have happened recently. So that would be examples of folks that you can get by without recalibrating, but to some degree, you're going to hit full on burnout if you don't make a practice of having these divine dates to recalibrate. And I remember when I was first introduced to this, I just know the necessity. That's why I'm sharing it. I was introduced to this when I was in graduate school. I was living in California. I was in graduate school. I had just broken 2 wrists at once while in graduate school. I was working. I was a full-time student. I was also interning in Beverly Hills, because you want real life experience with what you're doing as well. And now I had 2 broken wrists, and I was still showing up and still doing the things with like old school full on casts on. A story in and of itself. But that was wild. But I do believe that I ended up in that situation because I was not recalibrating. I kept thinking in my head, I need to break, I need to break, I need to break. Unbeknownst to me that I would get literal breaks in my life, but that's what my focus was. And we do know that what you focus on grows more in your life, right? So I don't believe it needs to get to that point to recalibrate. But one of the most beautiful things that happened was when I was recalibrating and like literally forced into recalibrating, because I was just a doer and a go person and an achiever and a make things happen, self-reliant kind of person, which that is probably one of the greatest disconnects that you can have from God, which is probably why I love that relationship so much now, is because I lived so disconnected, right? So at any rate, recalibrating, that was introduced to me, maybe not in those terms, but there was a beautiful book that came across my path, and it was called The Artist's Way. And Julia Cameron wrote this book. She's amazing. But there was two things that I took from this book that took me a lot of time to embrace. But I still do these things to this day. So one of them was the morning pages. And the idea with the morning pages is you take some sort of notebook like this and you write for 3 pages straight. You just brain dump. You get everything that's in your mind out and you put it on paper, and you don't reread it. You just get it out. That's the whole point, because the idea of what's happening there is that we carry so much that we're not often conscious of what we're carrying. And so that just gets it out. It kind of clears the slate so that you can be present, because all that stuff is usually in the way. So those are amazing. So to this day, I still have a journaling practice. Then the other thing, which I thought was just radical, I had never heard anybody talk about it, and it was such a huge jump for me. I just thought, like, how could I ever? Like, that just feels so weird, because it wasn't how I was wired. I was, at this point, a recovering people pleaser. I was a high achiever. I was a perfectionist. I was like, you know, in all of these doing type things. So to slow down and even set aside time for what she calls an artist date, I was like, how could I ever? And what the heck am I going to do? And I'm going to spend time with myself, and that's going to actually be enjoyable. And what's the benefit of it? I don't have time for that. So I was in such a heady space that it's wild. And looking at my life now, I think, how could I have not made time for that? How was I even effective at all, right? Like, who was I really as a human? Because when you're just going all the time, you're on fumes. You really don't have a ton of creativity flowing. You're not super present. You're not totally engaged, because you could be in a moment, but your mind is somewhere else. And it's just not a way to live. And I was going so fast through life that these artist dates taught me to block non-negotiable me time into my calendar for whatever I needed that day. If it was going to Barnes & Noble and sitting on the floor and looking through a picture book, we're doing it. If it was going to a beautiful place and going hiking and just being out in nature, that's where we're at. If it was writing, that's what I would do. If it was going and having like a pedicure, that's what I would do. If it was going to a movie by myself, like that's what I would go do. I would start using that time to start checking in, because I was so disconnected from myself, and then obviously God at that point. So that is basically the premise that I have about these divine dates to recalibrate. I set time to meet with God every day. That is a goal. Will you do it every day? No. But if that's your standard, you'll start to know when you need to recalibrate. The less time you're spending with God, the more you know where the source of your issue is, right? So like, if you have this standard of spending time with God and you've done that for some period of time, you start to see what happens from those pockets of time, right? The peace that comes over you, the wisdom, the discernment, the revelation, right? The calm, the creativity, the flow, the grace that you start to operate in, the presence that you bring to things, the way your faith is activated, the way you're just shifted, right? And you didn't even do the heavy lifting. So when you start to see these themes, you start to see yourself awaken to new perspectives, right? You start to see yourself operate different. You start to see, oh, that used to make me offended, but that doesn't even get to me anymore. You start to see these very real changes happening because of the development of that relationship, because of who you're connected to, right? So you start to notice, if you have this standard of having these divine dates to recalibrate every day, if you start missing these appointments, you start to notice your peace slipping. You start to notice your attitude. You start to notice your mindset. You start to notice a discomfort or heaviness in your heart. You start to know a rigidity or a sense of control or anxiety present again, right? Because you're disconnected, right? If you have something out of joint, that's obvious. You know, and you can experience the pain of that. It's similar. We live disconnected a lot of the time. So sometimes you have to, like I did many years ago, I had to force myself into that situation. I had to force myself to put on my calendar these divine dates to recalibrate, these artist dates, right? These are times that are non-negotiable. If somebody called me during that time, no, right? Like I had to teach myself how to have boundaries so that I could actually start practicing self-care because I had no idea. So that was radically, it was just mind-blowing how that started changing my life. And then being able to go through a wheel of life or really see like, ooh, like I can really see where I'm operating in darkness, so to speak. And let me elaborate on that. So on this team call yesterday, we were talking about, yes, the world is getting darker. The word of God actually tells us that, right? But the only way to endure that, to be present with that, and not let that overtake you is to be the light, right? Isaiah 60 is a perfect example. It's arise, shine, for your light has come, right? And the glory of God has risen upon you, right? So if you already have the light, you don't need to go out seeking the light, right? You just shine. You operate from it. Or another one, I think it's Matthew 5:14, somewhere around there. But that one is all about, what is that one? It just went away. Oh, that's the one where it's, you are to be a city on a hill, a city that can't be hidden, right? So you want to shine for all to see. It's like a lighthouse, right? Where you're up above and you're shining for all to see. So that's how you deal with darkness, but you cannot do that, right? If you're spending more time in the darkness, more time in your own understanding, more time on social media, more time on the news, more time in these things that are dark and that overtake you, right? They can put your light out, right? It's on you to fan the flame that's within, right? To recalibrate. Nobody can do that work for you. To really assess, like, what's going on with me? Where do I need to make adjustments? Because I might be okay today, but if I don't address this, I could be way off path, right? Give it a week, right? Give it a month, right? You can see how this is really, really important. So that's what I would say. If you don't have a practice of doing this, raise your standards. Raise yourself to a standard of, I am worth checking in with and recalibrating every day. That is healthy. That is normal, because I believe that I'm here to be a high functioning human. Okay. And the greatest gift that I can give to other people is my best self. And I cannot show up as my best self if I'm not giving myself an honest assessment, if I'm not making time to check in, if I don't have these pockets of time planned where I can just release and breathe so that I don't unleash that on somebody in the right moment and the right time and just wreck their day, right? Like, how can I get and actively get into a better state a majority of the time? It's not about being perfect. It's not about necessarily so that you can produce more, be more, all of that. It's because it's necessary. It's necessary to assess, what are a majority of your thoughts about? And what is the frequency of them? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like really positive and 1 being super low, where are your thoughts a majority of your day? Where are you living, right? Or then emotions. Are you like this throughout the day? Or do we have like some normal moments and like dips because you're a human and you, right? Like, where are you at? Do you go like so down here that you can't get back up? Or are you like all up here that you can't have some groundedness, right? Like, where are you at so that you can bring some stability and be present in what you're doing so that you don't run from the bad things or get too caught up in the other things, right? Like, how can you be content, as the Apostle Paul says, whether you're abased or abounding, right? You can get there, but I believe that that's in your connection with God. Or looking at what's going on in your heart. You could have a ton of amazing things going on in your life. You could have a new position. You could be financially free. You could be back in school. You could be doing all these really great things, but you are stuck because you left your heart in a broken relationship that you knew that you weren't supposed to be in. So you have this broken heart, which is also the lens through which you're seeing life, that you're trying to navigate your future with. But this needs healing. So the more you run from your heart, it's still going to bring you down, until you address it, right? And you'll repeat patterns that were back here because that's where you're living still, right? So it's things like that that you won't see sometimes until a breaking event happens, like in my story, right? Where you have to wake up. You don't really have another choice. You literally like have to be like woken out of your sleep, right? So I believe in staying woke, right? Stay aligned. And then when you get out of alignment, it's not that hard to get back, right? If you have a daily practice, then you don't need to take weeks off. Then you don't need to take months off. You can just recalibrate in a day if you need to. See what I'm saying? And you can also communicate your desires and your needs to other people out of honor and out of respect. I would really love to do that. In fact, I've been really looking forward to doing that. But that day I am not available. Can we do it on this day instead? Right? So that you still honor yourself, you still honor your commitments, and you still, right, can add these other things, but in the place where they fit so that you can fully enjoy and embrace them and not be somewhere else while they're happening. A lot of times we don't remember some of the most beautiful things in our life because we're in a different place when we're experiencing them, right? Like mentally, we're like thinking about some project or assignment that we need to get done, right? Or we're like with our kids, right? But we're not with them. We're on the phone or we're texting or we're trying to like solve some problem, and they feel it. They know that. Present but absent. Like, is that the impact that you want? So this practice of having divine dates to recalibrate is essential. It is a daily practice. It doesn't have to take a ton of time, although I bet when you start doing it, you'll start understanding how much you are hungry for it, how much you need it, and you'll start spending more time there. I know that I started just getting up earlier so that I could just soak in those experiences and moments because I needed a whole new rhythm. It's not, we don't just have one gear, right? Which is full speed ahead. We've got other gears, right? But you don't want to just drift through life in neutral or like no speed at all or just full speed ahead, right? You want to be able to bring what is needed for the opportunities that you're given. And when you recalibrate, you have way more awareness, you have way more presence. You're able to connect to the grace and allow that to flow through you and kind of get out of the way so that God can use you. And so many beautiful things happen. So my encouragement to you is to set a new standard and develop divine dates to recalibrate. And the first way to do that is give yourself at least one appointment a week. Set up at least one date to recalibrate every week. If you can't do it daily, set it up weekly. Okay? Not even bi-weekly, weekly. Okay. My encouragement, guys, is that you do this because you are your greatest return on investment. And you need to be given the right fuel, the right space, the right time, the right process in order to really show up and live this life that you've been given because it's a gift and you don't want to take a single day for granted. So if this is speaking to your soul and you could use some help with this kind of work or even diving deep into these areas, I do a lot of this in coaching. So you can go check out these coaching packages that I offer over on julianapage.com. I also have a self-mastery course. So if you're somebody that kind of has a wild schedule, I hear you. I created a 6-week course that is self-paced that takes you through this and many other things, but it is self-paced and there's homework assignments. So you can go through that week by week and just set aside time that you're going to do that. And you can even do that as your divine dates in the beginning. So go check out julianapage.com. If real talk like this is blessing your soul, make sure that you subscribe. You can even copy this link and share it with a friend. And if you haven't tuned into Spirit-Filled Real Talk, it's a podcast that I host every Saturday. You can get it on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. Tune into those. It's very much what it sounds like. I bring spirit-filled real talk to the table. I don't believe that we always need real talk, but we do need some spirit-filled real talk in our life, right? Like, how does this apply to my life? How does this word, how is this personal for me? How do I apply this? How do I pivot? All of that is really, really important when you want to align and live a very empowered life, a radically empowered life, right? All right, guys. That's all I got, I think. Yep. I'm going to go get a workout in because now this thing is making me sweat. I don't know. We got to find a good balance between this. But I hope this message blessed you guys. And until next time, stay blessed.